Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Insider webcast and podcast. I'm Jeff Bergerson, joined, as always, by my partner, Zachary Turcotte. We're with FantasyGolfInsider.com, your number one resource for everything fantasy golf, including DFS golf. Become a member right now because we have all of the tools, articles, and information that you absolutely need to gain an edge on the field in all of fantasy golf and DFS golf. You need to gain that edge and compete. Every week, we give you that information that you need. We are shooting this on Memorial Day, so I just wanted to be sure that everyone knows how happy we are, and thank you to our veterans, those who lost their lives in the service, those who are in the service right now and help provide us the freedom to live in this great country. So thank you to all the service people and all our veterans on this Memorial Day. In something that isn't as important, Zachary, let's talk a little bit of a golf stuff. A great week for FGI last week. Jeff Feinberg picked Kevin Kisner on the podcast, so we nailed that one.
33-1. It was his fourth outright of the year, so we've each got four now. I feel like we're in pretty good stride. We've had four each winners, and then we probably each had about 3 or 4 second place folks that hopefully people could hedge out on a little bit. But we've been all over it, I think, over the last month or two. I think we've really zeroed in on a lot of these fields. And I think particularly once we get to the courses that we know week to week, where we've seen for a few years, it's not a brand new course, brand new layout, that type of thing. I think that helps out quite a bit. So I think coming into the middle of summer, I think the picks are going to be really good. So if you've never tried outrights before, I think it's definitely a fun way to go. It's not quite the same. You don't have that Friday cut sweat, but that's kind of nice. If one or two of your guys blow up out of the 8 that you've put a little bit of money on, no big deal. You've still got 6 guys in the hunt because it's either first or nothing for the most part and winning there. So definitely give that a look if you haven't yet.
We also had a bunch of winners on DraftKings last week. A few to point out: Corey Still took third in the $5,000 tee box. Brett Butler won the $30,000 birdie, 20K max on DraftKings. Parm Man had a big week. Luke Manners tweeted us a shot of his green screen all over the place. Fantasy Wiz DFS, and just a good week overall. We got a lot of tweets and emails from you folks, so keep them coming. We always like to see those when you have success, and makes us feel like what we're doing is worth it.
The big thing last week was, if you listen to what we said about tee times and wind.
Oh, I was going to get into that, sir.
Yeah, if you paid attention to that. Now, we didn't say, just do the morning, just do the AM, PM kind of things, but if you at least took our advice on that and made all of your important lineups, like if you were playing in, $36 or $400 entry events, hopefully those were all AM, PM, and for, if you were doing the $3, or I guess it's $8 now.
No, it's AM.
Yeah, I mean, for that, generally, you can kind of sprinkle those a little bit, but you should have been making at least 30% of your tee times for those AM, PM last week, because there was a lot of buzz in the industry, and hopefully it didn't steer you away, but a lot of people said to just ignore the wind.
So here's what I have to say. So whether we were right or wrong about weather last week, and we were right. We nailed it on the head, and it proved to work well because it was better by 3 strokes. So it wasn't just a slim edge.
It didn't even out.
No, it didn't even out. Now beyond that, it's the whole idea of I heard people in the industry say wind doesn't matter in golf. Now, if your content provider, folks, is telling you that wind doesn't matter to golf, good luck to you, because it does. I hear a bunch of people in the industry say stats don't matter. They don't look at stats. Doesn't make sense to me. It's all information, folks.
Pick all of them in. Like there's
absolutely.
There's no reason to ignore them or to belittle one. And for what we tell people about wind is we never say panic, just look at wind and just play the wind.
Nope.
But the philosophy that we give in terms of the picks that you're making are, and I laid them out in my comments, that here's about the 20 guys or so in the early morning tee times that you should be considering playing this week.
So we're only choosing from our core. We're not just picking random people because of the time of their tee time.
So you're still just picking guys that you like to begin with. Yep. So you're just organizing them in a way so that if winds are hellacious like they were on Thursday and Friday for one particular tee time, that you're organized a little bit better than everybody else, so that when everyone else who is lazy, because there's a lot of people who just don't do tee times, they just they're just refusing to do it. But those weeks when those people get wiped out, and you're going to get hurt too. I mean, if you had Duffner and Perez like I did in my core for for my multi-entry events, you're going to get a little bit hurt there too. But you're still going to have that small amount of 30%, 40% teams that don't get smashed by the weather that should give you a little bit of an edge. So you lose nothing by organizing some of your multi-entry teams based on tee times. You could gain quite a bit. So there's really only upside to be gained there. Now, if you're, I guess if you really had a strong feeling about some of the elite players and feel like if you just said last week, I love Jordan Spieth. He's a guy who can fight through this weather. He's in the afternoon. Can I still take him?
Go with 5 guys in the AM and Spieth then.
Take Spieth. I mean, there's still going to be guys, and you still thought Perez and Duffner, these guys should still be able to fight through and make the cut regardless of what the wind conditions look like, and should be competitive over the weekend. So it's not like you have to ignore those guys, but
it's all about probabilities. We're trying to put ourselves in a little better position to gain a small edge. DFS is tough.
And golf is very tough.
Very tough. And you and I will not proclaim that we can guarantee which players are going to win every single week or even who are going to play well. What we do is pull all of the information that we can possibly get. Course form, current form, who putts well on certain greens, statistics, and weather,
recent
and
history,
everything.
Long-term history. I mean, there's the other thing going around right now is we just need to be looking at recent stats over a 4-week period of time. Well, no, you don't, because there's going to be guys who've had 2 events in 4 weeks who've struggled a little bit. And that's why recent form has its weighting, and then your long-term kind of weighting overall, and then just knowledge of how guys play. If you're just looking at short-term stats, basically what you're just getting right there is recent form anyways, because the guys who have the best stats over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks are the guys who've finished well in those events. That's all captured in recent form for the most part, which you see and what you know. But if you only are looking at those and you're only wanting to find players who have a little bit of momentum going, then you're going to miss guys like Bill Haas last week who come down in price and they're at 6,900, and you know what type of player they are over the long haul. But over his last 3 events, terrible short-term statistics. So I guess our message really is just don't pigeonhole yourself.
Don't ignore information
into one area or another. Take all of these little pieces into play. And you don't have, like when winds are up, you don't have to dive in 100% AM, PM.
When weather's unpredictable, and that's why we even say, even stack a small percentage of your teams the opposite way, because sometimes weather changes, forecasts are incorrect. So if you stack it the other way, and I actually said that in my email, I said stack 25% of your teams AM, PM, because they have the clear advantage, right? But also stack the other side, because if something changes there and something turns around, you still have some exposure.
And that's how you had about a $50,000 week at the Open 2 summers ago, is when everybody was saying you needed to go PM AM on that first wave for the Open. You had one team in a big event that was completely the opposite of that, and that ended up, the weather did flip around, because it does that for the Open a lot. And you ended up having the best wave overall, and nobody else did, and you ended up riding that to victory. So there is a little way of being contrarian for 5 to 10%, and you can adjust that a little bit in terms of severity. I mean, last week you could see winds were definitely going to be most severe Thursday afternoon.
And that's why we both said, stack the majority AM, PM. But to say, the winds won't be a factor, there's trees that'll block it, it's just crazy. So it's information. It might not always be right. And that's the other point I want to make, is that sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes weather's wrong. Sometimes stats are wrong.
It doesn't pan out.
It doesn't pan out.
Your worst case scenario is then you've just put together morning teams with guys that you already liked anyways. So you're not going to do anything weird. It's just how you're organized with those. So I thought it was really interesting to follow that last week, because there were so many threads. We probably saw.
I loved it though.
3 or 4
I loved
threads.
it because us at FGI are like, fine, we'll let those content providers tell their people that. We're going to tell our people that that it does matter.
It seemed it just seemed strange to disregard it so much. I talked to a couple of people, other content providers, who said, "Are you? What do you guys think of the wins? Are you?" I said, "Well, we've seen it too many times over the last 3 years." Sure. Going back, I think the first time it really smacked me was at the Valero a couple years ago. That was the first one where it was a 4-stroke difference between the AM and PM times in that first round. And so, from that point forward, really, I've always made it a point of emphasis. It's only going to matter. It's probably going to matter like 3, maybe 4 times a year significantly, like what we saw. Maybe 2 or 3 where it's this significant at the most.
We'll take it. If we can get an edge, we'll take it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Capture it when you can, and just be thinking in your head intuitively. Does it make sense not to consider the win this week?
Exactly. And that's why I send out the email every single Wednesday night before tea time lock the next morning, is to give you the latest forecast. No, I don't know of any other content providers that do that for their folks. So get you out that information, because you can add it to the arsenal of stuff that you're using to build your lineups, just so you can be more successful. That's all we're trying to do.
And of course, this week there's no wins, so
that's right.
It gets
won't matter
pretty light
this week
again, and so we can tell you wins probably won't matter this week.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Dean and Deluca and what happened beyond the wins?
Well, it was a pretty good event. We both had differing takes, and as far as the top of the board, it actually worked out the same. Yeah. Because you went in on Spieth, I went in on Rahm. Mm-hmm. Spieth was the afternoon wave. Had a really interesting high scoring. We put up 5 or 6 birdies in his first round. He looked like he was going to fall off again. Had some things where it looked like you got to like +2 or so, and it looked like things were going to come apart for him. And then birdie at the end to get back to even. And I thought, in my head at that point, I thought, he's going to contend now. He just made it through the worst of it, and he's not in bad position. He was only like 5 shots back at that point. So I thought, he's going to contend, and slowly worked his way up. By Sunday, he had put himself into position. So he rallied a lot like he did last year. Didn't pull it off. I didn't feel bad, though, with my Rahm pick, his going heavy on Rahm. He ended up being in a position. He actually had a putt to send it into a playoff. Missed that. It was tough to get on. It was really hard to get on both guys that are right around 12,000.
It was difficult.
If you do that, you're just taking away too much in that 8,000, 9,000 range, and having to relegate yourself down in the 7s and 6s. So I was content with my play. I just went with the form play. You went with a little more contrarian play, and I think it worked out there pretty well. The only real areas where I got hit were on that afternoon wave. The only 2 guys that I think really hurt me last week were Jason Duffner and Pat Perez, guys who had been really consistent, had pretty good course histories there. Perez actually started out pretty well, and then all of a sudden, the end of the first round, it just came apart late in the day when the winds got high. Both him and Duffner had chances on day 2 to get it back in play again. Couldn't do it, but 17 of my 19 picks through the cut over the weekend. Unfortunately, I did have emphasis on Perez and Duffner, which, hey, hopefully you did have at least one of your cash teams stacked for that AM, PM. And that's a point I was kind of talking back and forth with one of our subscribers out there, in that, when wins do get to be that bad and you're going to make 3 teams, build one of them to be weather repellent, or you just have one that's organized all towards that AM or PM to avoid whatever weather is out there. Because that definitely helped me as far as relegating some of the damage from Perez and Duffner. But overall, felt like we were right there on most of the picks, other than just a couple right up there at the top. And I know you only had like 3 or 4 guys out of 20 who ended up missing the cut for the week.
And I had a lot of Bill Haas, a lot of Danny Lee down at the bottom, and I paired them with a lot of Spieth and Sergio up top. So those teams worked out. Had a bunch of cashing GPP lineups. I did have some Kisner, but since I stacked some Spieth and Sergio, I didn't have as much Kisner. He was in my core, so I had some of them. But
it was tough to go below. Lee and Haas was kind of the range to stop at for the most part. And if you did that right there, you were fine. If you got below that, you start getting into the Martin Lairds of the world.
I had a couple Martin Laird teams.
Just kills me every time. He hurt me and Statboy. I had a team that we worked on and put together that finished like 70th or so in the 400 last week. But if Laird gets through the cut, it's probably a top 20 team or so. So that was a little aggravating overall. But yeah, invitational events are interesting in that regard.
For sure.
And that you always expect more 6-of-6 teams, and there were not really as many as you would expect, just given the fact that a couple highly owned guys.
Stanley and
Stanley, the whole world owned Stanley. And he was a morning guy too, so he had that going for him.
I want to say he was owned by like 70%.
In the Thunderdome.
In the Thunderdome.
I don't think anybody had a 6-of-6 team in there this week.
Is that right?
Oh, that just goes to show you that even your top players can get sucked into that sort of group think. And yeah, I mean, he was, I think, 28% owned in the 400 last week. So that's one of those things you start thinking about. It's like, all right, Kyle Stanley. As the week goes on, I mean, at the beginning of the week, you're not really thinking about. You think, oh, he's 15% or so 10, 14, 15%. But as you start to listen to the buzz, and this is why it is kind of important to kind of track what's happening a little bit in the industry. You can hear it just build and build
for sure.
and build. And if you think, if there's ever a week where Kyle Stanley is going to be owned by 30% of the field, I don't care what kind of run he's on. No. That's an automatic fade.
There's a lot of guys like that.
Yeah.
That you just, if you know that they're going to be that highly owned, get off.
And be thinking about that in your process, because everything we do, we've got to get everything out on Monday, Tuesday for you guys to get your research done.
Right.
But you're probably not doing a ton of your research until Wednesday, late Tuesday, Wednesday night, that type of thing. When a lot more information has come out from a lot more providers that are out there. So be sure to be thinking about that, because even as we're writing things up and putting things out there, it's changing.
It's going to have an effect.
It's changing. So if you start to see that buzz and you say, well, Jeff and Zach were on them a little bit here, but God, I can tell that this guy who's had just a marginal career is now going to be very highly owned, just from a game theory perspective. Find ways to fade those guys.
All right. Let's move on to this week's event, which is a loaded event, super exciting, only 2 weeks away from the U.S. Open. So this is kind of a preview with all the big dogs here. It's, of course, the Memorial Tournament at Muirfield Village Golf Club, Jack's Place, 7,392 yards, par 72. It's now in its fourth decade hosting the Memorial. Everyone's basically here this week, with the exception of like Rory, who's withdrew with his injury. Oh, Justin Rose. I think he had initially committed, but now he's not playing or something.
Yeah, he must have just been tired from playing last
from the BMW. So he's not in the field either. But most everyone else is here. Key stats this week: strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained putting, birdie or better, and proximity. Be sure to check out our FGI model. We'll put in our allocation for percentages, but you can also adjust that too on the model however you see fit. DraftKings prices. Well, first of all, let's just talk briefly about FanDuel. FanDuel's back this week. They took the week off last week to make an adjustment, which we talked about on the podcast last week. We thought it was going to be they're going to get rid of the stupid 2 rounds, So and they did. So
which it's joyous.
Why didn't you just do that in the first place?
No, it's good. I'm just happy they did. I mean, they could have been even more stubborn and just stuck with it. And they're finally through the worst of. So that should be the last that we hear. I mean, just industry-wise, for if you're a fantasy golf lover, that's huge news, because going into the merger next year, one of the big worries we thought was, well, what is the golf product going to look like going forward? And I think this seals the deal that we've got a 4-round product. So whether it's 6 guys, whether it's 8 guys, whatever the pricing ends up looking like from here on in, we like this game. We like the 4 rounds. We like the cut sweat. Everything about this works fine. So and I actually like the scoring for FanDuel a little bit better.
I think it's good.
I think it's a little better. They've cut away some of the things that we don't like. I didn't see any. When I looked at the scoring, I didn't notice any hole-in-one bonus or anything like that. It's a little bit more punitive if you got a double bogey or worse, which I like. They've still got some goofball streak points in there.
It's okay. I think it's 0.6 or something like that.
Yeah, if you get any sort of streak going.
That's fine. It's so,
something extra to cheer for. It's not a huge deal.
No.
You get
I'm fine with it.
You get the bogey-free round points that are in there as well.
I like it. I think it's good.
I think the score, so I like what they did with the scoring. We'll see if they can get the interest going again. That'll be the big thing. That's
what I was concerned about when they launched and there was a ton of excitement. I'm like, oh, but the product stinks. It's not a good game and no one likes it. And that proved to be the case. But now it's going back to a game that we wanted in the first place. So I hope they can get the momentum. I hope people come back and play it.
So give it a shot. I think it'll slowly build up a little bit. If they make the contest, they're just going to have to pour some money in.
They're going to have to, because they started with huge overlays when they first announced the product, and I think they might have to do that again to get the interest back, to get the money back in.
I think it will. I mean, the pricing structure is much more flexible than DraftKings.
Right.
DraftKings is pretty tight. You know, you have like 6,200, I think is the low, up to 12,000 or so.
Yep.
But FanDuel, it's stretched a little bit. So if you're willing to take a little more of a risk on some of those bottom guys, it goes down, and I think to the 4,000 range. A lot like what DraftKings.
It's kind of opposite in football, though, because DraftKings has the wide in football, where FanDuel is more condensed. It's kind of weird how it's opposite of that.
So I'll have to play around and try to get used to it a little. See if that's what kind of settles in week to week overall. But,
I'll probably start playing there again. I quit playing after the first few weeks where they're huge overlays, but now I'll go check it out and dabble a little bit.
See what the contests look like,
So let's break down some DraftKings pricing, Zachary. We obviously have all the big folks up top, starting again with Dustin Johnson at $12K. The thing, again, is the whacked out pricing that we see on a lot of guys down in that $6K range, just scratching your head at how some guys are 1,000 more than others. We'll dive into that, but let's start up top. Are you going Dustin Johnson? Are you going John Rahm, who's been hot? Jordan Spieth, who flashed form last week? Jason Day, who flashed form 2 weeks ago?
I think I'm probably going to stick to Rahm right now.
Just Rahm?
I think so. He's been so good to me for the most part when I've been there with him. He's a little bit cheaper than DJ. I think they've got fairly similar styles of play. It's his first time at this course, so there may be a little learning curve, but it hasn't necessarily,
say that every week.
Hasn't necessarily been a big issue.
No.
And we've had, if you look at the guys who've won the last 2 years, McGirt wins last year.
Yeah.
Lingmerth the year before that. So it's, it can come from just about any place.
Can.
So I think I'll probably save that little bit of cap space and go towards Rahm. It's tough for me to tell ownership-wise. Both of those guys are going to be really highly owned. Is DJ going to edge out Rahm, or is Rahm playing so well, and will the cheaper price bring his ownership
I really
up
don't
above
know.
DJ?
I don't know yet. I'm going to have to listen to the buzz and see what people are saying to know.
Now, what's interesting when we go down just a little bit here, we got Jason Day at 10-3.
Yes.
He lives here.
It doesn't matter.
At Muirfield Village. He makes his residence here.
Yep.
He's played here 8 times. He's never finished higher than 27.
Which was last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is going on with that? Is there anything in this course that you see that would lead you to understand? Is he just too relaxed because he's home with his family?
You realize it's her family, don't you?
Well, yeah, I know he's from Australia.
In-laws, sir.
Right?
In-laws. Get it straight.
Do they all live in his house? Do they all live there?
No, but they're all hanging out with him at the course and everything.
That affects you. So.
Well, you gotta. Yes.
So you think the stress of that weighs on him?
It could. What's another explanation for it? Unless the course just doesn't fit his game, but the results have not been there.
It doesn't make any sense. You look at it, it's wide fairways. Okay, so the one thing he probably isn't is super accurate off the tee, but he bangs it a mile. So real wide fairways. He's got a good approach game. Greens are fast, but he's an excellent putter. There's not really any rhyme or reason for me to see why he doesn't have at least like 1 or 2 top 10s.
But I do think that's going to affect his ownership tremendously this week.
In a positive way, or
No, I think it's going to be low.
Oh, just because of the fact that he never has finished. Yeah, it typically is. So
for sure, especially with the others up top, and especially with Jordan Spieth having a big week last week.
So are you a day buyer? He's the contrarian play up there.
That's what I'm saying. He is contrarian. I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to go with Jason Day up there. I like too many guys. I love DJ. I like Rahm. And then I like guys below him too. You drop down to it's Ricky Fowler at 8,900.
It's so hard to argue against a lot of these guys that are up here. Hideki missed last year, but he's going to bounce back. He's won here a couple years ago. Adam Scott has been playing really well, striking the ball. Excellent. That does make it tough to get today. And then, Kuchar's had an amazing tournament history. Yeah, and then Ricky, who's had trouble here. 3 straight missed cuts, which is another thing I look at and think, what has happened the last few years that he's missed on? He doesn't come in right now on a lot of form because he hasn't played much since the Masters. He
No.
played the team event where he missed.
But before then, he was playing real well.
Played great. Yeah,
Yeah.
He was not great at the Players.
He wasn't good. Well, he was for stretches, but yeah, overall not good finish.
A lot of guys weren't very good at the Players.
Right.
So I guess to me, I don't really know what to make of his form because you got to go all the way back to Augusta really to get any kind of accurate gauge on the form. But this is about as low of a price as we're going to see
For sure.
Ricky all year. He never dips below that 9,000 mark.
No.
Unless he's playing really bad, and he hasn't played really bad. So
Right.
I think it'd be tough not to have Ricky, but Ricky's always popular.
He'll be
too.
20% probably.
Yeah, I think so at that price because somebody will load up with somebody at the top, and then that'll be the next tier that
Right.
they can reasonably afford
Yep.
to drop down.
I'm waiting for Hideki's game to come back just to be the superstar that I think he is and that he showed early in the season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have slowly drifted off the bandwagon.
Exactly.
A lot of people waited it out because he'd been so good for so long. And now it's like, gosh, with all the other quality guys up here, can I afford to wait another week? Maybe you can in cash. You'd be fine if you went with him in cash.
But I don't think he's going to be highly owned.
Really?
No.
Even with the win?
No, I don't think he's going to be highly owned. I don't think he's going to hit 20%.
15 to 20, somewhere in
15,
that range.
I'd say.
Yeah, somebody probably right there in that range.
Yep.
The middle range, I'm not sold on the middle eights quite as much.
There aren't a lot of guys in there that
I'm not going to pay up for McGirt.
How about Brian Harmon, your guy?
Yeah, man.
At 8,200?
You can just put in missed cut if he's on my playlist for
Yeah.
the week. He constantly disappoints me down there. He's been playing really well overall this season. Form-wise, he's been great. This hasn't been a great tournament for him. He's not a particularly big hitter, so it should be one that he struggles at a little bit. I kind of dropped down out of that range for my next guys that I look at.
Me too.
Tony Finau at 7,900.
Right.
He should attract a lot of attention. He's been great here
Yep.
over the past couple years, with the big fairways that shouldn't be an issue. The par fives are all reasonable. There's a couple in like the 520 to 530 range, a couple around like 560 or so. He should be in position for a couple of eagles.
Right.
He should be in position for a lot of birdies on those. So he should be able to do some pretty good damage on those this week.
I thought he would play better last week. I really felt he would. I was high on him last week.
Made a little bit of a run on Friday. It looked like on Friday I think he got all the way to -3 at one point, -2 or -3. It was like 5 under in the middle of his round, and then it just kind of flattened out the rest of the way, which was a little bit disappointing. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't a miscut or anything. 7,900 for him is just such a great price.
I know.
Even a couple weeks ago, we saw him at 9,200. He's got the same upside against the field that's here, and he's had great performances. So I think he's a pretty solid play in looking right there. Can you trust Webb Simpson yet after what we've seen lately, or is he just a guy? He's on your He's on your no playlist, isn't he?
Yep. There's guys I like much better than him, down much lower in price than him. Not too much in the 7Ks that really intrigue me. Gary Woodland at 7,200 continues to just kind of tease me a little bit because I'm just waiting for him.
Phil Mickelson at 77?
Have you ever seen him that low?
No.
I don't think so.
And I don't know why. I mean, he hasn't
been bad.
He hasn't been bad. I mean, for cash, I think he's probably a guy you stick in almost all your cash lineups this week for that price. Because even though he may finish 28th or 29th in terms of where he places on the leaderboard, he usually makes so many birdies that he's a top 15 guy, DraftKings points wise. So I think you get a really nice price break there. Can you go back to Kisner at 76 this week, or
sure?
I
can.
Is he going to take a little bit of a break? Now
You're always concerned with that because we see it a lot.
Kisner did it the last time. He was second. The last time he took second at an event, although I think taking second at an event kind of breaks their spirit a little bit. Winning, you're still feeling good. You feel elated.
Yeah.
Taking second, you're like, man, I was almost there. Now I'm starting over on a Thursday morning, teeing off, and it's so maybe the fact that he won, I think, is probably a little better than the fact that he was second before that. But yeah, I mean, it's like they're just forcing him into your cash game team.
Pretty much
7,600. Guy wins an event at 9,700 last week. Wins an event, comes to an event where he has had a top 10 finish before. And he gets a $2,100 price.
One of those weird pricing misses.
I think
one of the many.
I think you have to play him there, but there weren't a lot of other guys who I loved.
No.
I do like I do like the Gary Woodland play there. I think we're seeing his game start to turn just a little bit after having the issue with his wife. And we don't want to wait too long when guys start to turn around like that, because they're not going to stay there in price.
Right.
And we've seen guys just go from a little bit of form to winning events this year. We saw it with Siwoo Kim just a few weeks ago, so you don't want to miss out on that. And then you get down, once we get below 7,000, it was all of a sudden, it was like, let's just put everybody else at 6,900 or 6,800 this week who's in play. Bill Haas doesn't get any price bump at all at 6,900 after a top 10 last week in an event that he's had pretty good success. The one that really stood out right there too is Byung-Hoon An.
Oh yeah, crazy.
He will be on.
He stood out on the pricing versus sportsbook odds tool that we have on our site. It was one of the higher ones that you'll ever see.
I mean, it's possible for him to miss a cut, but I probably will have him on all my cash game teams this week. I just don't see a way not to include him for that price. He's typically been a guy they've priced pretty good. They've had him at like right around like 8,000. 8,000 to 8,500. That's kind of been his range. And that was a pretty good range all year. And he's been really good all season. I don't know that he's missed a cut this year. I don't think he has.
I don't think so.
He's over the last few weeks, he's playing the best golf that he's played all season. Now he is coming over from Wentworth from the BMW. So there may be a little bit of, he may be a little bit tired in coming over, but I'm not gonna worry about that too much. I mean, it's a 6-hour trip. He probably made it pretty quick after they were finished yesterday. So I don't know if that's gonna be a dramatic effect. And
Mark Leishman at 6,900 had me scratching my head too.
Right,
he's got a good tournament history here. Playing pretty well.
Steve Stricker's been great this season. He's at 6,900. I like that. Charles Schwartzel, if he's back from his injury.
Yeah, that's a tricky one right there, because I saw that price. I'm like, whoa, that's really good for Schwartzel. But wait,
I don't know.
He wouldn't be playing if it was bad, right?
No, he'd just take another couple weeks off and play the U.S. Open.
Right.
There's no reason. I mean, it's the Memorial. It's a bigger event. Could we call it the Sixth Major just for Pat Mayo's sake?
Right.
So it's a bigger event, but I would think he would just rest. He wouldn't aggravate an injury or make it any worse.
I wouldn't think so, yeah.
He tweeted out earlier that he was not having problems with it. So it's a decent opportunity if the price is good. I think the fact that he was injured will scare a few people
for sure
away from owning him there. So,
and I wouldn't own him in cash games, to be honest with you. I just wouldn't take any risk because there's other good options down at that price.
Great price, but yeah, I wouldn't risk it in cash games. But because there's plenty of other guys. You look at we got Pat Perez, 6,800. my guy, the Mr. Mullet. He had a few bad holes in the end of the first round, and it threw him off the rest of the way. I don't know if I'll put him in cash, but I think he's playing well. He's been good here over the years, consistent. Peter Uihlein at 6,800. He's been really very good in Europe. Super consistent this year in terms of making cuts.
Finishing T32 most weeks.
Hey, if he's 6,800 for an event like this, if he gives you that.
But those are in much, much lesser fields, though.
Yeah, they are.
He's a guy I like a lot, and I've owned him most every week on the European Tour, so I will own some of them.
And he's looked good in a couple PGA events. Which ones? I know he played Puerto Rico, where he was great, obviously, which was a very weak field. He was in at least one over here where he was
Arnold Palmer
pretty good.
Or something?
One of the Texas ones he was in where he was reasonably good.
Oh, was it? I don't remember.
So, but
he's a good player, and I like him a lot, and I'll be using him in some GPPs.
And then, down at 6,700, Cabrera Bello. Form seems like it's coming back.
Yeah,
again.
It seems like that.
I was surprised that we didn't at least see like a $7,500 price tag. I'm sure odds versus pricing for him are crazy too. And I mean, and these are just a handful of like really big names that stood out. And there's still a few others that are down there as well. And it is an invitational format again.
Smaller field.
120 guys in the field. Same cut rules apply. Top 70 and ties. So nothing changes right there. So you can be a little bit more aggressive, although I don't recommend getting crazy with it just because we've got the same cut line rules. Because if you do, each guy that you lose is going to hurt.
Right.
It'll hurt a lot. So even if you only have 4 or 5 guys out of 30 who missed the cut, each of those guys, if you own 10 or 15% on some of those guys, it's going to be really, really painful along the way. So,
anything else to add?
No, I think we gave out plenty on that 6.
Be sure to check out Zach's Daily Spin. It comes out on Wednesday. I'll have my Hardcore Core out on Tuesday late night probably. Perry has his preview column, and Adam has his first tee. Check out the model and Eric's
the Albatross should be back this week.
FanDuel article, so that's cool as well. If you have any questions for us, email us at info@fantasygolfinsider.com. Follow us on Twitter @fantasygolfers. Zach does his Periscope on Wednesday night, so tune into that as well. Thanks for tuning in for the Memorial Tournament, and we will talk to you next week for St. Jude.
Good luck.